Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Picture this scenario. You are sitting around a roaring fire at deer camp, swapping stories after a long day in the brush. Inevitably, someone in the group is going to start preaching the absolute gospel of the 243 Winchester. And from a pure operator's perspective, I completely understand the obsession. Getting behind the trigger of this specific caliber is an absolute dream. Muzzle rise is basically a myth, and the recoil impulse on your shoulder is virtually non-existent. You can run dynamic drills on AR-500 steel targets from sunup to sundown without ever developing a flinch. It sends rounds downrange on a laser-flat trajectory, and the mechanical precision is undeniably surgical. Over the decades, it has built this massive, almost mythological reputation as the ultimate Swiss Army knife of the gun safe. The hunting community treats it like a magical problem solver. They fully expect it to vaporize a coyote at 4 football fields away and then turn right around and anchor a massive whitetail with the exact same optic zero. But here is the brutal truth of the matter. That legendary status is actually a tactical trap. The 243 is incredibly smooth, and it drives so effortlessly that it lulls shooters into a dangerous false sense of security. Folks start believing this little 6mm projectile defies the established laws of terminal ballistics. Then, reality eventually comes knocking, usually right when everything is on the line. You do not discover a caliber's critical failure point while you are ringing steel on a gorgeous Saturday afternoon. You find that hard limit when the heavy-bodied buck you have been tracking for 3 seasons finally steps into the clearing. You prep the trigger, break the shot, and the bullet simply lacks the kinetic energy to cause catastrophic central nervous system failure. The fight simply does not end. Today, we are stripping away the campfire nostalgia and diving deep into the hard, empirical data. The 243 Winchester is a masterful piece of engineering, absolutely. But it has rigid physical limitations that the seasoned veterans gloss over and the rookies have yet to discover. We are going to unpack the 243 paradox. Let us get into it. Number 1. The bloodline. To truly grasp the modern tactical landscape of this round, we have to flip back the calendar. Look closely at the first half of the 20th century. American riflemen treated 6mm projectiles like they had the plague. The domestic market was a complete ghost town. If you were absolutely determined to run a .243 diameter bullet back in those days, your only viable ticket was the 6mm Lee Navy, and you had to run it through that incredibly weird, quirky Lee straight-pull bolt-action platform. A few sporting models trickled out to the public, but by 1935, that entire concept was practically dead and buried in the US. Over in Europe, however, completely different operational environment. British gunsmiths were pushing the envelope with 6mm bore diameters long before it was trendy. Back in the 1920s, premier shops like Holland & Holland, along with Purdy, were engineering these fascinating, exotic chamberings. I am talking about the heavy-hitting 240 flanged Nitro Express and the 246 Purdy. From 1895 straight through the roaring 20s, the European market birthed a solid half-dozen 6mm variants. Meanwhile, the American market was absolute radio silence. That is precisely why the year 1955 shook the foundation of the U.S. firearms industry. Seemingly out of nowhere, 2 titans of the industry, Winchester and Remington, threw down the gauntlet. They dropped brand new 6mm options right onto the laps of the American consumer. It was an instant heavyweight title fight. The 243 Winchester squared up against the 244 Remington. Winchester's engineering team played it brilliantly, keeping the logistics simple. They grabbed their newly minted 308 Winchester brass and simply sized the neck down to accept a smaller pill. It was highly efficient and incredibly smart. Remington took a totally different route. They built their entire foundation on the battle-proven 7x57 Mauser casing. For the historians out there, yes, that is the exact same brass architecture that spawned the iconic 257 Roberts. If you are just looking at the engineering blueprints, Remington actually held the tactical advantage. Their casing featured a slightly longer body profile. That created significantly more internal volume for powder capacity, which mathematically translates to higher velocity potential. The Winchester offering was stubby by comparison, purpose-built to cycle flawlessly inside short-action receivers. And you have to keep in mind, back in 1955, the whole philosophy of a dedicated short-action hunting rifle was still in its absolute infancy. Number 2. The marketing war. Now, if you were a ballistician in the mid-50s analyzing pure data, you would have bet your entire paycheck on the 244 Remington. It delivered superior muzzle velocity and boasted a much larger powder column. On paper, it should have been an easy, overwhelming victory. But Winchester executed an absolute masterclass in market dominance. They did not rely on raw speed to win the war. They sold pure, unadulterated versatility. Winchester dropped their new 243 into their crown jewel, the flagship Model 70 bolt gun. But they did not stop there. They aggressively chambered it in the Model 88 lever gun, and the folks over at Savage quickly adapted it for the legendary Savage 99 platform almost immediately. They absolutely flooded the zone. Remington, conversely, committed one of the most fatal blunders in firearms history. They fundamentally misread the operational needs of the American rifleman. They pigeonholed the 244 strictly as a dedicated, long-distance varmint tool. They shipped factory ammo loaded exclusively with lightweight 75 and 90-grain projectiles. And here is the absolute nail in the coffin that killed the project. They spec'd their rifle barrels with a sluggish 1 in 12-inch rifling twist rate. If you are exclusively running ultra-light, hyper-velocity varmint loads that act like hand grenades on impact, a 1 in 12 twist is perfectly fine. But that slow rotation absolutely fails to stabilize the longer, heavier projectiles required to humanely harvest medium game like white-tailed deer. They literally crippled their own platform right out of the gate. Winchester's leadership saw the writing on the wall and capitalized instantly. They marketed the 243 as the ultimate crossover weapon system, a platform you could deploy against coyotes on a Saturday morning and then use to fill your deer tag on a Sunday afternoon. They offered a fast 80-grain load optimized for flat trajectories, alongside a heavy 100-grain soft point designed for deep penetration and maximum meat retention. The ultimate tactical advantage? Winchester utilized a much faster 1 in 10 twist rate, guaranteeing those heavier bullets would fly true and stabilize in flight. The American consumer responded immediately with their wallets. The 243 Winchester exploded in popularity, becoming an unstoppable freight train of success. The 244 Remington simply withered on the vine. Fast forward to 1963, and Remington essentially waved the white flag of surrender. They attempted a massive marketing pivot, officially renaming the cartridge the 6mm Remington. They tightened up the rifling issue by stepping up to a 1 in 9 twist rate, and finally rolled out a factory 100-grain option. But it was way too little and way too late. The war was completely over. Look, if we are geeking out at the reloading bench, splitting hairs over case geometry, the 6mm Remington is objectively the superior engineered cartridge, especially if you are running it through a long-action receiver. But in the firearms space, consumer perception dictates reality. The 243 Winchester seized the crown, and it has maintained a relentless death grip on that position for 70 years. It remains the undisputed heavyweight champion of the 6mm class. From the dense brush of the Texas hill country to the stalkers braving the Scottish Highlands, this caliber is an absolute global staple. Competitors have constantly tried to take a shot at the title. We saw the 240 Weatherby Magnum make a run. We witnessed the rapid rise and fall of the 243 WSSM. None of them could disrupt the market dominance of the standard 243. Number 3. Ballistics and application. Let us dive into the telemetry that cemented this ballistic dynasty. Your standard off-the-shelf factory ammunition typically features an 80-grain projectile screaming out of the muzzle at roughly 3,350 feet per second. Or you can step up to the 100-grain payload, cruising right around 2,960 feet per second. But advancements in modern propellant and projectile geometry have completely blown the doors off this caliber's potential. Today, you can source specialized loads ranging from ultralight 55-grain screamers all the way up to high BC 105-grain heavyweights. It effectively bridges the entire spectrum, going from prairie dog eradication to taking down western pronghorn antelope. The standard rule of engagement goes like this. Anything dropping below the 90-grain threshold is strictly varmint territory. Those specific bullet profiles are engineered for massive, rapid fragmentation upon impact. Once you cross into that 90-grain and heavier territory, you are dealing with projectiles specifically constructed for controlled expansion and driving deep into the vitals of big game. And no matter what grain weight you feed it, the inherent mechanical accuracy across the board is simply superb. For the dedicated predator control guys, those lightweight pills are absolutely catastrophic on target. Look at the Winchester 55-grain ballistic silvertip. The factory box claims a muzzle velocity of 3,910 feet per second. I have personally stood next to operators running 26-inch heavy barrels and watched the chronograph read well past 4,000 feet per second. That kind of terminal performance is a literal red mist machine. On the flip side, the guys putting in serious work on long-range predator sets often gravitate toward the 80-grain options. Those heavier projectiles simply buck the wind significantly better than your standard .22 caliber centerfire platforms. But if we are being completely honest with ourselves, the 243 carved its name in stone as a dedicated deer hunting platform. It delivers precision accuracy. It completely refuses to punish the shooter's shoulder. It removes the intimidation factor entirely from the equation. That is exactly why it serves as the ultimate default first rifle for millions of American sportsmen. And frankly, my own journey started there too. It is the perfect training tool to hand to a new shooter, allowing them to master their trigger press and build fundamental confidence without getting hammered by recoil. But that forces us to address the massive elephant in the room. Is the 243 Winchester truly the optimal tool for the modern hunter today? Or has it become a tactical handicap that we are just too blinded by nostalgia to admit? Number 4. The hidden cost. Despite all of its incredible virtues, and there are plenty of them, the 243 Winchester carries a very dark side. These are the hard lessons you usually learn long after the check has cleared at the gun counter. When you are operating inside standard hunting parameters on deer-sized game, let's say inside a 200-yard envelope, the cartridge is devastatingly lethal. It gets the job done without question. But the second you decide to stretch the legs on that rifle, or you find yourself tracking a massive, heavy-boned northern buck, the physics change rapidly. The 243 bleeds off its kinetic energy extremely fast at extended ranges. If your shot placement is absolutely surgical and you punch through both lungs, you are going to recover that animal. But your tactical margin for error literally evaporates. It becomes razor thin. When you stack it up against heavier platforms like the 7mm 08 or the legendary 308 Winchester, you lose a massive amount of forgiveness. If the animal quarters away slightly or a crosswind pushes your impact an inch or two off the mark, you run into serious penetration issues. The next critical issue is something that usually only high-volume tactical shooters and competition guys openly discuss. The 243 is a notorious, unapologetic barrel burner. You are channeling an immense volume of superheated, high-pressure gas down a relatively tight 6mm bore. In the industry, we classify this as an overbore cartridge. That violent combination of extreme heat and pressure basically acts like a sandblaster against the throat of your chamber.
If you are running high-tempo precision rifle courses or doing high-volume eradication on a prairie dog town over a 3-day weekend, you will physically watch your accuracy degrade fast.
I have personally seen match-grade barrels get completely torched and lose their edge in as little as 1,500 rounds. For a precision platform, that is a shockingly short service life. Now, if you are the guy who only sends a single box of ammo downrange a year to verify your optic zero before deer season, that barrel will outlast your grandchildren. But if you are a serious practitioner who believes in rigorous live fire training, it is a very real logistical and financial limitation that you have to factor into your gear selection. When you combine those two operational factors, the severe drop-off in terminal energy at extended distance and the highly aggressive rate of throat erosion, you really start to see the tactical cracks in the armor. Here is the final after-action report, folks. The true power of the 243 Winchester does not come from it being a flawless, magical cartridge, because it absolutely is not perfect. The real strength of this platform is unlocked when the operator understands exactly what the ballistic envelope is, and more importantly, respects what it cannot do. If you strictly deploy this weapon system within its intended comfort zone, it remains one of the most capable, flat-shooting, and pleasant cartridges ever brought to market. But the second you let ego take over and try to push it past those hard boundaries, whether that means attempting a Hail Mary shot on a bull elk at 500 yards or trying to run it like a high-volume tactical carbine until the barrel glows, you are going to have a profoundly bad time. And in the field, those consequences can be heartbreaking. Recognizing exactly where that ballistic red line is drawn, that is the critical difference between stocking your freezer with prime venison and making a miserable, empty-handed hike back to your truck with nothing but a story about the one that got away. I really hope you guys extracted some solid intel from this ballistic deep dive. If this breakdown gave you a better perspective on your gear, do me a favor and aggressively crush that like button. Make sure you hit subscribe and turn on those channel notifications so you are always dialed in for the next upload. And head down to the comment section right now. I want to hear your personal after-action reports and war stories with the 243. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Put it in the comments below because I want to read them all. Train hard, stay situationally aware, and I will see you on the firing line in the next video.